Hi YouTube. Well, after my last little video about my AAT task that I did at Taupo, I had a few questions about how AATs work, and I thought it would be nice to have a little video that explains how they work and some strategies for dealing with them. What are AATs and why do we have them? First of all, we need to have a look at racing tasks and understand how they work. And they're pretty simple. We have a start line or a start circle and a finish line or a finish circle, and then you have a number of half-kilometre radius turn points. Everyone has the same turn points and you all have to go to those exact same spots, and whoever goes around the task the fastest wins. Pretty straightforward. Here's an example of racing task here from Omarama. And you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 turn points, and they're all half a kilometre radius. It means 1 kilometre diameter. And if you have a look here, you can see my flight track goes through them. Super simple. All you have to decide when you're flying is what is the fastest way to get to those points. So, an AAT task. It's essentially the same. We have start and finish in exactly the same way. A key difference is you can have turn points of varying sizes. Now they might range from the half K circles through to 20 or 30 kilometre radius circles. The task setter decides at the beginning of the day what size circles they're going to use. And it's not always circles, you can also use segments of different angles, say 45 degrees or even semicircles. And you can even combine a segment with a circle to make a keyhole. The key point is whoever's fastest around the task wins. That is exactly the same as racing tasks. You can choose where in those turn points you actually want to go. You can go right to the back of the circle or just nick it. But then why wouldn't everyone just nick the circle and go round as fast as physically possible? This is where the task setters set a minimum time for the task. So for example, you might set a task time of 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours or more. If you come back early, you are scored as though you took that minimum time, which has the effect of giving you a slower speed overall. Here's an extreme example. If you fly 200 kilometers, but you do it in 1 hour, but you have a task time of 2 hours, your actual speed would be 200 kilometers an hour, but you'd be scored as though you'd flew 100 kilometers per hour. So the key takeaway from that is you never want to come back early because you are penalized if you do. And that has the effect of making you want to fly further. If you get back early, it means you could have used that time that you're going to be scored for anyway. You could have used that time to go further and deeper into one of the other circles. So just to recap, never come back early. Always make sure you come back over time. So, how much over time? I tend to aim for about 10 minutes or so. As you saw in that last video, I came back early, which meant I suffered a 2-minute penalty. So the question is, well, why don't I just fly for 4 hours? If the task time's a minimum of 2 hours, why not go as far as I can? And there are some downsides. For a start, the percentage of your flight that is final glide will be smaller if you do a longer task. So here's an example. I put just from that flight I did the other day, you can see 12% of my task time was final glide. And final glide is always going to be part of the fastest part of your flight, unless you're doing wave or something else like that. Weird. So, if I were to do another half hour of flying, it would shrink the percentage of time that my final glide is. Also, the longer you're in the air, the more chance you have of getting stuck somewhere or landing out in a field or taking too long and running out of daytime and not getting back because you run out of day in the thermal stop. So you want to be overtime, but you don't want to be extremely overtime. However, sometimes it is worth being overtime. As long as your average speed can be increased by being overtime, then it might be worth it. Some examples. Let's say the first half of your flight, or at the beginning of the flight, you got stuck and you took ages to climb out of a hole. And then the rest of the flight's been going really well and you've been thermaling great. You'll probably increase your average speed if you fly more in the good weather. You might find the second half of the flight is in wave or ridge lift. Now this happens occasionally in New Zealand in particular. If you can run a good ridge later in the day, and it means you'll get home later because of it, it might well be worth it, because you're essentially flying without stopping. We often get good strong convergences later in the day. So again, if you go to your final turn point and find a massive big convergence running into that last turn point, you can probably increase your average speed by using that, coming back out on the convergence, and basically extending your final glide. And sometimes the day is just a lot stronger later in the day, but you've always got to weigh up. Is it worth the risk of landing out or getting stuck somewhere? Being under time. So this is what I did, and obviously it's bad. After you go and turn at the last turn point, it's too late. You can't go back and add more time in any way, or more distance I should say, in your time. If you discover you're going to get back early, you might as well just slow down and make sure you get back safely without any risk of landing out. Don't even think about trying to go round the back of the finish circle or anything like that. You're scored to the center of the circle anyway, so it makes no difference at all. And it doesn't make any difference if you come back 10 minutes under time or 1 minute under time, you'll be scored at the minimum time. So there's no point screaming through the finish line if you've still got 15 minutes spare. Some task setters will set a time soak, and that can be very useful if it's near the finish, and you can use that to extend your flight and use up a bit of time right near the finish line. Sometimes it is worth coming back early deliberately, and the only real reason would be if the day is falling apart or you just can't push into the last turn point. You're better off not risking a land out and getting back and completing the task. You should end up with more points than if you were to land out somewhere. So some basic strategies. Go deep into the first circle if you can. And it basically just gives you more options later. If you're not sure what the weather's going to be like later, or at a far turn point later on, and the first one is reasonable weather, you might as well go into that one. Then you don't have to go as far into the later ones. However, if the weather's stronger than expected, you can go deeper into those later ones. So it just gives you more options. If you've got a big circle, you're better off going deeper into it while you can. You've got more options to choose where to go in that circle. So you can go right, left, way deep into it, or just nick it. You can choose that best bit of sky, go over that good little mountain range or whatever, and make the most of what's in that circle. If you've got a little circle later, let's say your second to last turn point's a big one, and then your last turn point's a small one, you don't want to have to push right to the back of that small one necessarily. It might not be a good place to go. And you don't want to run out of space in that last turn point, because you might get to the back of that turn point and then it's too late. You've already screwed it up. Some more strategies. Think about the wind. Sometimes if you've got a big turn point, going too far downwind means you have to push all the way back upwind, and you might be better off going, in this case, to the top of the turn point, so you've got more of a crosswind leg home rather than a push into wind. You want to try and line up with the weather, and if you've got, for example, convergences or streets, use them. If you find a street or convergence running into a circle, use that to go deep into the circle and run back. And just like a racing task, you want to go as fast as possible without turning. So use those energy lines if you can. Here's an example. Starting at turn A, come to turn B, you join the cloud street, run down to the end back of turn B, and then run back along that same street and then to the finish. Some tricks and tips. Learn to change the target of where you're going in the circle on your navigation device. So all of them let you do this. You've got a big circle. You can, for example, on an Audi, click on that circle, make sure it's selected the AAT circle, not airspace or a waypoint or something like that. And then you can choose where in that circle you're aiming to go. And that will adjust all your calculations on final glide, how far you've got left in your task, and your estimated time to get home will all be calculated based on that new position you've set. Be a little bit wary on the time estimates to get home. If it's using your average cross-country speed to do that, your final glide is a lot faster, so you have to be careful not to get home early. Here's a trick. Plan where you're going to go before you launch. So have a look at the terrain and the countryside and figure out which circles will be best to go deep into and which ones aren't. Think about where the weather's the strongest, where you're likely to get convergences or good thermal runs on top of mountains or whatever. And you can set up your navigation device in advance with those circles and the positions you're thinking of going to them, and you can always change it later if that plan doesn't work out. Don't forget the golden rule, whoever's fastest wins. And to be fastest, never come in under time. So let's have a look at the task that we did the other day and see what went wrong. You can see here I started the task, we crossed the start line here, P1. In hindsight, I should have gone deeper into P2, because what we'll find is the next turn point there were no clouds and it was quite limited how far we could go into that. So that was my main mistake, not going deep enough in the first circle. Then we tricked back. We're heading over to this turn point on the left there, and at this point here I ran out of clouds. So if we have a look at what that looked like, there's the view out the cockpit, and you can see run out of clouds. There's maybe a couple of little ones here. I probably could have gone along them, and in hindsight probably should have, because I ran short of time. Whereas if we go back to leg 1, let's see what that looks like. Could I have gone further into leg 1? Yeah, possibly. It wasn't super high, and the way back looked better, so that's probably why I didn't. Okay, now let's trek along. There's actually a third turn point here, and it's not as big as the others. And I actually made a mistake on this day. I set that turn point to be smaller in my navigation device than it actually was set to. Which meant, you can see here, I turned around well before the back of the circle. So again, I had another opportunity to go a bit further, and the sky was looking great at that time. If we skip forward to leg 3, look at that weather there. We could have easily gone a bit further there. So that was a big mistake, not having my GPS set up correctly, and I had the wrong size circle in there, which is why I turned at that point. So I had multiple opportunities to to not come home early, and it's definitely something I need to work on, is my timing of the tasks. If you make sure you're 10 minutes late, you'll pretty much always guarantee you'll be fine, even if you come back a bit too fast. So there you go. I hope that's useful. Let me know if you've got any questions about AATs in the comment section below, and we'll try and answer them. Until next time, catch you later.